Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
While I'm disappointed by the outcome of the judicial review, I accept the decision.
Surrey's divisive, expensive policing saga appears to be over. The mayor says the city is now moving forward after a long battle with the province. Plus,
tenants are valuable members of our community that we can't afford to lose.
New Westminster Council says yes to new protections for renters, as some fear the risk of rent-evictions. And
I have a lot of concerns about this continued increase in the mayor's office budget.
He campaigned against big office spending, but Vancouver's mayor now wants to add a staff member to his office.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The Surrey policing saga appears to have finally come to an end. After years of fighting, Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke says she accepts that the Surrey Police Service will be that city's police force. The CBC's Tanya Fletcher joins us now with more. Tanya, what did the mayor say about her change of position?
Well, Dan, that acknowledgement not insignificant coming from this mayor after a long battle with the province. Mayor Brenda Locke has made it clear she will accept the municipal police service following that failed court challenge. And this follows years of digging in her heels at every turn to try to keep the RCMP. But while she does accept the transition, she still insists it is not in the best interests of Surrey residents, mostly because of the price tag attached to it. Speaking at Monday night's council meeting, she says the city is moving forward in the wake of the courts siding with the BC government.
While I'm disappointed by the outcome of the judicial review, I accept the decision, and we are moving forward with what the city needs to do to ensure that our residents are prioritized with the provincially legislated police transition.
You can hear some of that resignation in her voice, and now some are actually calling for her resignation. This is a social media post from the Safe Surrey Coalition. It says Locke should step down for, quote, wasting millions of taxpayer dollars. Now, keep in mind, this is the group led by former Mayor Doug McCallum, who initiated the transition to the municipal force when he was in power.
Tanya, what comes next out of all of this?
Yeah, so now that some of the political dust has settled here, Dan, the Surrey Police Service says there's been a surge of interest in joining the force. Ian McDonald with the SPS says hiring has ramped up after that BC Supreme Court decision quashed Locke's attempt to stop the transition. Now, the city had previously refused to pay the salaries of new municipal officers, and that prevented the Surrey Police Service from growing its ranks. But now the force has put together a staff of 367 officers and 60 civilians.
We anticipate that we're going to have many more deployments between now and November 29th, and we hope that momentum is regained and that we will be able to expedite what is now this long overdue policing transition.
So the Surrey Police Service will officially become the police of jurisdiction on November 29th, Dan.
Tanya Fletcher, thanks very much. Vancouver police says officers have arrested 5 men and recovered more than 24 kilograms of illicit drugs after a 14-month investigation into a gang originally from Montreal known as Zone 43. The VPD says Zone 43 started operating here a few years ago, a trend they say could lead to turf wars and increased violence. Last month, investigators recovered 7 kilos of fentanyl, 11 kilos of coke, 2 kilos of methamphetamine and 2 kilograms of cutting agents, including benzodiazepine. They also seized 2 handguns and more than $150,000 in cash.
Our staff are committed to combating organized crime groups operating in our community, especially those from other jurisdictions that seek to establish operations in Vancouver and profit from the sale of toxic drugs.
Hurd says the 5 men arrested have been released and will be facing numerous drug and other criminal charges once police finish their investigation. Vancouver City Council is considering adding another staff member to Mayor Ken Sim's office. While the position is not new spending, it will push Sim's office budget higher than his predecessors. As Chad Pawson reports, it's something he promised not to do when he ran.
Vancouver's Mayor Ken Sim is set to get a new office staff member from the city's civil service with $80,000 in already approved funding. The change, though, is contrary to Sim's promise to run a tight, efficient office. 2 years ago, Sim was campaigning to defeat then-Mayor Kennedy Stewart. He was critical of spending for 2 chiefs of staff, saying it was a waste of money.
And every single president of the United States and every single prime minister of Canada have gotten by with 1 chief of staff, and then we have the city of Vancouver that needs 2 chiefs of staff under the current mayor. That's an issue.
As mayor, Sim only has 1 chief of staff, but his office budget has not shrunk, it's increased. In Kennedy Stewart's last full year as mayor, his office budget was $1.11 million. In Ken Sim's first full year as mayor, that number increased to $1.27 million. Currently, it's ballooned to $1.47 million, with the potential to increase another $80,000. Kennedy Stewart won't wade into his replacement spending decisions, but councillors outside of Sim's own party on council are expressing concern over the proposed change of course.
I have a lot of concerns about this continued increase in the mayor's office budget.
Why are we making this shift to now reallocating civil servants to the mayor's office?
Councillors were asked to approve this immediately, but with Mayor Ken Sim away on other city business, the vote's been pushed back 2 weeks. Opposition councillors do want their questions answered. How is the mayor spending his budget, and on what? In a statement through his office, Mayor Ken Sim says the funds are simply being reallocated to where they are needed most. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
To Nanaimo now, where police say up to 8 pro-Palestinian protesters entered a restricted area at in a Vancouver Island University building. Police say the group has been told to leave by security at VIU for trespassing. Mounties say the protesters have been peaceful, but officers are on scene waiting for instructions from university staff. Protesters say they're asking VIU to disclose all of its investments and use its influence to help end the destruction in Gaza. Parks Canada says a white grizzly bear known as Bear 178, or Nakota, has died after being hit by a car near Yoho National Park, close to Field, BC. A vehicle hit the bear on Thursday along the Trans-Canada Highway, but she was found dead on Saturday, likely from her injuries. Parks Canada says that crash happened just 12 hours after Nakota's 2 cubs were hit and killed on the highway. It says staff were repairing fencing along the route and tried to encourage Nakota to get off the road. She was then reportedly startled by a train and ran into traffic. Dakota's frequent roadside visits made her popular online, but park officials said she became too comfortable around people, so they put in a no-stopping zone where she and her cubs were spotted. BC's Premier is livid with Ottawa for what he calls, quote, showering money onto eastern provinces to help with immigration pressures and leaving the West with nothing. David Eby made those comments at the Western Premiers Conference in Whitehorse.
They've offered us nothing. $0. With 10,000 people coming to our province every 37 days, we have right now refugees and homeless shelters. We have international students grappling with a lack of supports in the community.
Eby is talking about the federal government's $750 million offer to Quebec to help pay for a surge in temporary residents there. He says Canadians are seeing resources go to Ontario and Quebec at the expense of Western provinces, adding he expects the feds to offer BC the same share of funding on a per capita basis. One refugee advocate says immediate support for refugees arriving here has a huge impact.
Refugee claimants who are supported really well from the beginning, they get on their own 2 feet and they're on their way in a much faster way than people who are kind of left falling through cracks or don't get the housing they need or the support that they need.
BC government figures show there were more than 475,000 non-permanent residents in this province as of January 1st, an increase of about 84% from 2 years earlier. New Westminster is following in the city of Burnaby's footsteps when it comes to imposing new renter protections. The move comes after the province passed legislation aimed at increasing housing density around transit hubs. As John Hernandez explains, housing advocates say protections are needed as the risks of rent-evictions grows higher.
So I would encourage council to think about a creative, innovative policy, and let's push back.
One by one, local tenants took center stage at New Westminster City Hall, advocating for better renter protections.
These people come in as money and these big places, and we get kicked out.
Efforts that seemingly paid off as the city unanimously passed a renters' protection motion Monday evening.
Tenants are valuable members of our community that we can't afford to lose, just like they can't afford to lose their housing.
There's some areas in the downtown area, particular of New Westminster, where tenants are particularly vulnerable, and we want to get ahead of that.
The motion was put forward by City Councillor Nadine Nakagawa in response to recently passed provincial legislation that's aimed at spurring housing development around major transit hubs.
There's these rings of density that the province has mandated around the transit centres, which sounds really good in theory, but some of the unintended consequences of that is that affordable rental in that area might be torn down to create new, newer buildings that are far more expensive.
Those higher density rings amount to about an 800-meter wide circle around the city's Columbia and New Westminster SkyTrain stations. Local tenant union volunteer Dustin Godfrey lives in that ring.
I'm paying about $1,400 a month, and I'm looking at probably, if I were to move into the average unit in New Westminster, I'd be looking at around a 50% rent hike.
Godfrey is among local advocates applauding the city's move. The protections are expected to be modeled after bylaws in Burnaby, where developers must rehouse any tenants they displace and cover potential rent increases for up to 3 years. Tenants then have the right to move into the new building at their old rental rate.
Because it's a newer build, it's actually an improvement for some tenants, right?
New Westminster staff are now working to develop the city's official policies, while these advocates call on other municipalities to follow suit. John Hernandez, CBC News, New Westminster.
1 in 3 people living in BC are thinking about leaving the province because it's too unaffordable, and half of 18 to 34-year-olds say the same. Those are the findings in a new Angus Reid survey. BC's premier admits the province is struggling to keep up with a rapidly growing population.
And one group that I am worried about is young people, making sure that they feel welcome, that they can build a good home in British Columbia. That's why we focused on affordability for young people, tough conversations with municipalities about what they need to do to allow the kind of housing people can afford, using public land to build the housing that people need. And I know this group is under huge pressure.
Angus Reid says 53% of respondents believe the believe the NDP needs to focus more on taking steps to address housing needs. Its research finds Vancouver, Burnaby, Kelowna, and Victoria all rank among the 12 most expensive cities in which to rent in Canada. A day after it threatened more job action, the Union for Canada's border officers says it has reached a tentative agreement with the federal government. At least 9,000 employees of the Canada Border Services Agency were planning to strike beginning this Friday. But the Public Service Alliance of Canada now says negotiators worked around the clock to reach a deal. Details are still under wraps, but the Treasury Board says the deal does include wage enhancements and other benefits. A ratification vote will be held in the coming days. Scheduled in the coming days. Workers have been without a contract for 2 years and wanted pay parity with other law enforcement agencies. Canada's banking sector is facing another shakeup as the National Bank of Canada is set to acquire Canadian Western Bank. The all-share deal has been valued at about $5 billion and will see the Quebec-focused National Bank expand here into the west of the country, taking over Canadian Western's 39 branches and about 65,000 clients. The deal comes just months after RBC closed its multi-billion-dollar acquisition of HSBC Canada, which was criticized for increasing market concentration. A federal court judge has ruled Canada's environment minister did break the law when he waited 8 months to recommend an emergency order to protect endangered spotted owls in BC. Court records show Stephen Guilbeault determined the species faced imminent threats if logging continued in its habitat.
I would think that from now on, the minister and subsequent ministers will follow the law. And when they make an emergency finding, they will quickly go to cabinet to essentially sound the alarm.
The judge says the delay is unreasonable and unlawful under the Species at Risk Act. It's believed there is only one wild-born spotted owl left in this country, and it lives in southwest BC. Ottawa has about a month to appeal the court decision if it so chooses. BC's latest snow survey shows our snowpack is well below normal. As of June 1st, it's averaging 57% across our province. The Ministry of Water, Lands says the snowmelt-related flood hazard, though, remains low. And despite significant heat last month, no flooding was experienced. But it warns the low snowpack, early snow melt, and ongoing drought are creating significantly elevated drought hazards for this summer. Let's bring in Darius Badavi now with a first look at the weather and what we can expect out of that report.
Yes, as you mentioned, Dan, around 43% below normal. So that's still very much in the lower end of years in terms of this. But if we compare what's happening right now to last year, we are in a slightly better position because last year a severe May heat wave meant that we lost around almost 90% of the total snowpack that year within the spring. And then by this time, that also means that where we are this year, where we've had a sort of more mild, more seasonal spring, means that we've had a more consistent input of that water, which means that as we continue to move into the spring or into the summer, we'll have that more consistent inputs because we have more of the snowpack. Even though we didn't reach quite the high that we did last year, it'll be added more consistently. So maybe a little bit of good news there, but still, again, a lot less water being added from the snowpack than there is usually. And here you can see why I had the camera so weird, because the data does not extend all the way up there. Now, with that being said, if we take a look at our fire danger, you can see some of the impacts of that lower snowpack. Again, fire danger still extremely high across the north, despite some cooler and slightly wetter conditions in many areas. Tomorrow, we may see this drop a little bit more, even the fire danger, because again, temperatures are going to slowly recover, but for tomorrow, they'll be a little bit lower in some places up in the interior. So maybe in the Peace, we'll see the fire danger come down a little bit more, especially if we see some of that precipitation make its way up there. We'll have a closer look at what exactly we're expecting in terms of that precipitation and what we saw today later this hour, Dan.
That sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
It has been 18 months since UBC's Museum of Anthropology closed its doors for seismic upgrades. But this Thursday, it will reopen to the public. Staff have been working hard to prepare for that. Caroline Chan got a sneak peek of the changes and their plans for the big reopening.
What I love about this time is that I walk through here regularly and I see change.
Hi, I'm Caroline.
Hi, Caroline. I'm Sue Rowley, and I'm the director here at the Museum of Anthropology. Welcome here today. We're so pleased that you could be with us.
I'm very excited to be here. It's a very exciting time for the museum. Can you tell us about it?
Well, we're absolutely thrilled because finally, after 18 months of closure, we're going to be able to open the doors to the public again and welcome back our visitors. And we've just been missing everybody so much. One of the things that's different is this beautiful curtain glass. So you really get that sense of there's really nothing between you and the outside, which was one of Arthur's visions. A section of the building was found to be insecure in an earthquake, in the potential of an earthquake. And that is the iconic Great Hall of the museum designed by Arthur Erickson. And so the decision was made to rebuild that. They had to take it down below ground, build it up from first principles, and put in base isolation, which are actually, they're like these giant tubs of lead shot that the building sits on. And in the event of an earthquake, the entire building will absorb the shock and move.
What does it mean to be able to house these exhibitions in like a seismically safe building?
It's incredible, right? I mean, it's just been such a journey, but having it there is, when we think about that ability to protect and to care, when you think about one of the things, when you think about museums, you think about people's connections, relationships, but you also think about the duty of care.
We have two new exhibitions.
We have, along with our Pacific Northwest galleries, which are new. I mean, everybody who comes will see some pieces that they remember, that they love. Oh. And this canoe is by John Marston from Semanis, and it is a Coast Salish Inner Harbor canoe. And then we have two major exhibits that are opening. We have To Be Seen, To Be Heard, First Nations in Public Spaces, 1900 to 1965. And that's really looking at First Nations of British Columbia and the ways that during a period of intense assimilation policies and dispossession, First Nations peoples chose to represent themselves in public spaces as living, self-determined, Indigenous and modern. And then the other exhibit that we have opening is Lisa Rehana, who's a Maori artist, her incredible work In Pursuit of Venus Infected. And that is an audio and visual sound presentation.
So for the reopening, what kind of special events have you worked on?
For this weekend, we wanted to make this really special. So Thursday night, the doors open for the first time to the public at 5 o'clock. And we will have an opening event. Of course, there will be some speeches, but people will be able to wander throughout the gallery, and that will be free to everyone. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the museum will be half price. Friday is actually what would have been Arthur Erickson's 100th birthday. So we have an architectural tour happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, followed by a small celebration of Arthur's birthday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we have Tatsu Sakaya, Coastal Wolfpack, will be doing a performance, as will the dancers of Damala Hamid on both. They'll be here on both Saturday and Sunday. There will be tours by the curators of the different shows. There will be activities for youth. There will be workshops. So there will be lots happening. Oh, as you have seen, there is so much happening in the gallery spaces at the moment. There's a few of the sort of last-minute construction things. The carpenters are laying new carpet throughout all the gallery spaces. The exhibits are being installed. So we're really at this point of doing the sort of finishing touches and getting ready to welcome everyone back.
When I was walking through, when we were just kind of looking at the galleries and everything, I'd forgotten how much I missed this. Are you excited to have people back in here and kind of experiencing it?
Absolutely, because that's what energizes the space. I mean, we have these incredible works that speak to cultures from around the world, that have so many stories to share and tell to people, but it's really hard for them to share and tell when there aren't people here. And so having people here and having them interact and connect and come through and think through what that means. And we really are looking to provide answers to questions or open people's minds to questions they haven't thought about. So that's what we're excited about.
While romance might be in the air this summer, the cost of living doesn't care. After the break, we look at how to go on dates this summer without burning a hole in your wallets. Stay with us. Dating in Metro Vancouver has its own unique challenges, but with the cost of living on the rise, the balancing act of impressing one's date and staying on budget, if that's your goal, is getting harder to manage. To take a look at how you can date this summer without breaking your bank, we're joined by relationship and dating expert Amy Chan. Amy, first of all, how have you seen the rising cost of living influence dating here?
Yeah, I mean, on average, it's costing $149 to go out on an evening date. And with inflation, with unemployment, people are scared to go out on dates because it's breaking the bank.
How often do you hear this? Is it widespread? Is it a single, perhaps, age group?
I definitely see it more in an age group, Gen Z and some millennials. That's typically the group of people that are having a hard time right now with their dating lives because of rising costs.
How do you think societal pressures and expectations shape dating behaviors, if they do?
Well, I think there's a traditional point of view that on a date, a man should be paying for the date. And I think that's actually changing now. If you actually ask people, and especially the Generation Z people, they are more open to splitting the bill, doing dates that aren't so high priced. They're a lot more open-minded than having this strict rule about how dates should go and who should be paying for them.
Does that also is that also the same for perhaps same-sex dating?
Yeah, I actually think it's more of a generation thing. So when I look at my clients, people who are 50 and up, a lot of them still subscribe to more traditional. Some of them will say, hey, whoever does the asking should pay for the date. And then I would say that my younger clients, they are a lot more open, and they don't really care who's paying. They don't have strict rules around it.
Now, for those who are hesitant to date because of money worries, what do you suggest?
Look, you don't need to have this lavish 3-course dinner on a first date. You don't want that. What you want to do is do something that requires movement. Go for a walk, go for a hike, go for a bike ride. And the reason why this is great is there's actually something called excitation transfer, which means that when we actually have our heart race a little faster, or maybe a little spike of an adrenaline because we're going on some hike, we actually can transfer that arousal and attraction to the person. So the context and environment and activity of the date can actually increase the attraction for someone.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. If somebody's not feeling up for a bike ride or perhaps something more physical, what are some other creative ways people in Metro Vancouver can date without overspending this summer?
Great question. You can go on a picnic, go to one of our incredible beaches. I also love going to a farmer's market. Maybe you're not going to buy anything, or maybe there's a food truck that you can share a meal if the date is going well. But you could start off with doing something like that and see if there is any connection. And if there is, then you move on to the next thing.
Amy Chan, relationship and dating expert, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hunter Biden has been found guilty on 3 charges at his federal gun trial. He was also found to have lied about his drug use while buying a gun. More after this. Federal Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she is, quote, vastly relieved after reading the unredacted version of a report on foreign intelligence. A heavily edited version released last week alleges some parliamentarians have actively helped foreign governments meddle in Canadian politics. Evan Dyer looks at May's reaction and what other federal leaders are saying.
I would describe myself before reading the report as good and freaked out.
That, says Green leader Elizabeth May, is why she chose to read it.
I found myself looking around at colleagues, wondering who could it be? Who would sell out this country?
Any MP with a security clearance can read the original report without redactions.
Having read the full, unredacted National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians report, for myself, I can say, I have no worries about anyone in the House of Commons. There is no list of MPs who have shown disloyalty to Canada.
Not one sitting MP is accused of knowing collusion, she says.
Saying, as I do, that I'm relieved does not mean that there is nothing to see here, folks.
She says the report mentions one unnamed former MP who did knowingly give privileged information to a foreign operative.
That person, former MP, whose name is not included in the report, should be fully investigated and prosecuted. There are other examples of people currently in elected positions in Canada who are not members of Parliament.
That could include people at the subnational level, such as provincial or municipal governments, May said. She also said that foreign actors identified as seeking to influence officials include corporations as well as governments.
I want to make certain that there is none of my MPs which has any kind of implication with the foreign and hostile power.
Today, Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet said he also wants to read the report and is getting the clearance to do so.
I feel this is my duty.
And today the PM went after the leader of the opposition for not doing the same.
Elizabeth May took on her responsibilities as party leader, got her security clearance, and did the work. Mr. Poilievre should do that too. He is choosing ignorance so he can play partisan politics.
But Trudeau's number two asked twice if the Liberals would expel any caucus member who knowingly worked for a foreign power, refused to answer. Elizabeth May was careful not to break laws in her account of what she read, and she gave just enough information to dispel some of the cloud of suspicion that hangs over the federal parliament, while raising new questions about former members and about other levels of government. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meanwhile, the Liberal government's plan to increase capital gains tax passed today with the backing of the NDP and Bloc Québécois. As Kate McKenna explains, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre finally picked a side, saying his party would oppose that planned increase.
After months of refusing to take a position, Pierre Poilievre came out swinging.
Now his solution is to bring in a giant, job-killing tax on healthcare, homes, farms, and small businesses.
The government plans to tax Canadians and corporations more on the profits of assets like real estate and stocks, known as capital gains. It says this will only affect the richest Canadians and will bring in billions in new revenue.
The Conservatives are coming out against fairness. They think a nurse or a plumber should pay tax at a higher rate than a multimillionaire. Canadians are watching. Canadians now see whose side the Conservatives are on.
But some doctors and farmers say they're being unfairly dinged, and business groups warn it'll hamper growth.
The finance minister is about to impose another job-killing, wage-cutting, price-hiking tax on Canadians, and she wants us to believe the latest fairy tale that somehow we'll all be better off if the Prime Minister just raises taxes again.
This vote was always going to pass. The Liberals' deal with the NDP gives them a majority. The Bloc Québécois voted for it too.
Yes pour 208 208, nays contre 118 118.
Je déclare la motion adoptée. But the government wanted to force Conservatives to take a position, creating a wedge.
Conservatives stand with the wealthy while we stand with the middle class.
Wonder why we can't have nice things in Canada anymore?
Conservatives put out a video saying more taxes are not the solution.
We need to overhaul the system to make taxes low, simple, and fair.
Poilievre says if he's elected prime minister, he'll create a task force of working people to come up with a plan to lower taxes. Meanwhile, the changes to capital gains are set to take effect on June 25th. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is continuing his diplomatic push in the Middle East to bring an end to the Israel-Hamas war. The UN Security Council has now approved an American-backed ceasefire proposal. Hamas is reportedly seeking some amendments on that deal, while Israeli officials claim Hamas has rejected it after receiving the militant group's response through mediators. As Julia Wong explains, the White House says it's evaluating the response from Hamas submitted to mediators in Qatar and Egypt.
There was hope and expectation over the ceasefire proposal, which had been backed by the UN Security Council. The deal involved the release of hostages and exchange of Palestinian prisoners, a permanent end to hostilities, and a major reconstruction plan for Gaza. An Israeli government official says the plan would allow Israel to destroy Hamas, free hostages, and eliminate threats to Israel in the future. Today, at a Gaza humanitarian aid conference in Jordan, the UN Secretary General made an urgent plea for all parties to support the ceasefire plan so the war can come to an end.
The horror must stop. It's high time for a ceasefire, along with the unconditional release of hostages. I welcome the peace initiative recently outlined by President Biden and urge all parties to seize this opportunity and come to an agreement.
Also today, concern from the UN Human Rights Office over possible war crimes. On Saturday, Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages who had been held in Gaza since the October 7th attacks. Gaza's health ministry said that operation killed more than 270 people, and it injured close to 700 people. The UN is pointing to how the Israeli raid happened in a very crowded area. And it also says Hamas holding hostages in busy places puts the lives of both civilians and hostages at risk. It says the actions by both parties could be war crimes.
The conduct calls into question whether it be precaution, proportionality, and distinction. The scale of destruction, the scale of the people, the number killed and injured, seriously calls that into question, whether those principles have been applied.
Israeli tallies state roughly 120 hostages are still being held by Hamas. The UN says all should be released immediately. Julia Wong, CBC News, London.
Hunter Biden has now been found guilty on all 3 felony charges at his federal gun trial in Wilmington, Delaware. Jurors found the U.S. president's son lied about his drug use on a form when purchasing a gun 4 years ago. Caroline Malone has the latest from Washington.
An unprecedented verdict on Tuesday, with the son of a sitting U.S. president being found guilty. Hunter Biden guilty of 3 charges of illegally possessing and buying a weapon, while in his case he was a drug user. Now, he'd insisted all the time that he wasn't guilty, but it was very clear from the evidence given in the court case that he had been suffering from substance abuse for many years. He and his team claim he's been sober since 2019, but the gun purchase in question was at the end of 2018. In the trial itself, members of the Biden family were on the stand, including Naomi Biden, that's Hunter Biden's daughter. We heard from juror number 10 after the verdict, and he said that was one of the saddest moments for him because he's hearing from the daughter of a man that has a substance abuse problem. He said, though, ultimately, that even though it was sad to hear this kind of evidence, that it was very clear that Hunter Biden was guilty, and that was why the jury came to this unanimous decision, all 12 of them finding him guilty.
This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction, his choice to lie on a government form when he bought a gun, and the choice to then possess that gun. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made his conduct dangerous. No one in this country is above the law.
Now, Hunter Biden, of course, the son of the US President Joe Biden. He did release a statement, though, saying that he's not just president, he is a father, and the love of his family is incredibly important. Hunter Biden also expressing how important it is that he has the love of his family. We saw that as well from First Lady Jill Biden, who was there during the trial, and also as that verdict came in. Now, it could take up to 3 months for any kind of sentencing. There's the potential for Hunter Biden's lawyers to appeal, but we will likely get a sentence within 3 months' time. Caroline Malone for CBC News in Washington.
You might think reaching for the veggie chips at the grocery store is the healthy choice, but some researchers say not so fast. We'll tell you why after this. We have another shakeup in BC politics to tell you about ahead of the fall provincial election. BC United has dropped its candidate for Surrey North amid comments about the war in Gaza and LGBTQ+ people. In a statement, BC United party leader Kevin Falcon says he recruited Assad Gondal to fill his commitment to make BC United a party of diversity. He says Gondal has shared opinions inconsistent with the party's views on the situation in Gaza and its support for BC's LGBTQ+ community. Falcon said he spoke with Gondal to confirm if he's willing to follow the party's position on those issues, but says Gondal told him he cannot change his values and principles. Falcon then terminated Gondal's candidacy. His departure is the latest candidacy termination in BC politics. In late March, the BC Conservatives dropped Dr. Stephen Malthouse as a candidate amid misinformation claims about COVID-19. Darius Madavi is back with the full forecast and a very red map.
Yes, very red. That is the takeaway. Now, before I start, I think many people are familiar with my thoughts on seasonal forecasts and how they are not really the thing you want to go on, but Environment Canada has released its seasonal forecast for the summer, meteorological summer, so June, July, August. As you can see, much of eastern Canada, very red, meaning it's a 90% chance or greater in this dark red color that it's going to be a warmer than average summer. The colors do not tell you anything about how much warmer it's going to be, or in the case of us here in the BC coast, how normal or how much cooler than normal. Because again, here on BC's coast, that is the only place we're expecting the most likely scenarios that things will be normal or above normal. But again, seasonal forecast does not tell you anything about the heat waves that you can expect or those chillier weeks. So just because we might be normal on average doesn't mean that we're not going to see heat waves, doesn't mean that we're not going to see chillier weeks. So when either of those things happen, please don't blame me, because they might. In terms of precipitation, pretty much no signal, as you might expect. Precipitation much more difficult to forecast than temperatures, even seasonal forecasts. So as usual, not really anything to note. I know it says that we might be a little bit wetter than usual. That's probably the more likely scenario, but I wouldn't take it with It'd be a very big grain of salt, I'd say, take it with. Now, let's take a look at what's going to happen across southwestern BC over the next couple days. We clear up a little bit tomorrow morning, some of that cloud that we might redevelop overnight. Pretty beautiful day tomorrow afternoon. Then on Thursday, we see those beautiful skies continue. Towards the end of the day, we start to see some cloud build in. I do think this is a bit earlier than it'll probably happen. Maybe a bit of high cloud building in at this point, maybe a little bit of low cloud as well, but I don't think it's going to happen. We're not going to see that total cloud coverage until much later in the day. If we take a look across BC, you'll notice here we go. A lot of precipitation coming for other parts of the province as well as we get into the end of this week, particularly Friday. There you go. That's the big wave. Some showers will likely continue across parts of BC as we get into the end of the day as well. Those windy conditions we've seen across much of BC also starting to calm down over the next 24 hours. But again, a lot of windy conditions might return on Friday. And despite some nicer conditions over the next couple days, especially in southern BC, lots of sunnier conditions, the rain will return, as we saw, Dan.
Okay. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Researchers say plant-based junk foods are not without risk. A new study found ultra-processed products can raise the risk of heart disease and death. Christine Burritt explains why and what foods fall into that category.
Because now we can turn plants into burgers and hot dogs.
Yes, they're plant-based foods, but they're also ultra-processed. Question is, are they still just as good for you? A new study says, no, they're not.
This is kind of one of our first signals suggesting that they aren't that good for us.
Brazilian researchers looked at the implications of food ultra-processing on heart health from plant origin foods. Based on over 100,000 people surveyed in the UK, they found increasing your intake of plant-based foods by 10%, including fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and beans, can lower your risk of having a heart attack or stroke. But eating plant-based, ultra-processed foods, things like buns, margarine, bread, and cookies, appear to do the opposite, increasing your risk.
The real question that somebody like me has is why is that? And we don't know that answer yet.
Inside this lab at the University of Toronto, they're trying to figure out how various nutrients affect our body. What we do know is most ultra-processed foods are industrially formulated with additives and preservatives, promoting convenience and shelf life, and their marketing is evolving.
The strategy is often to health wash the products and make them appear healthier than they actually are.
Studies have shown half our daily calories come from ultra-processed foods, especially kids. This dietitian's advice, try to buy whole, unpackaged foods.
Yes, we can have convenience foods, but we need to look at the labels to see which are ultra-processed and which are just processed or cooked from scratch.
She adds, the shorter the ingredient list, the better. And researchers insist, as some try to cut back on meat and dairy products, filling up on plant-based junk foods is not a healthier option. Christine Burritt, CBC News, Toronto.
It looks old, certainly sounds old, but spoiler alert, it's not. What do tourists make of Gastown's steam clock? And does the truth dampen their experience? We'll hit the streets to find out.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is the exclusive media partner of the 2024 Indian Summer Festival, July 4th to the 14th. The festival showcases over 80 artists across a spectrum of arts, from live concerts to discussions and visual arts displays. Tickets at indiansummerfest.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
A minke whale in Nova Scotia is safe thanks to some quick thinking by whitewater rafters.
They found the animal stranded on a sandbar in a river near the Bay of Fundy. Here's their story.
We saw something out on the beach, something big, and sure enough, it turned out to be this live whale in a small tidal pool, only about half a meter deep.
She probably came in from the bay, entered in when it was deep, got probably too far down the river. The river can rise and drop up to 2 inches a minute, and she was just cruising over top of sandbar. And then by the time she realized that it was just too shallow.
I can definitely tell by looking at it when it was there that it was not having a good day. For about half an hour, we were splashing water on this whale, waiting for the tide to come in. You could get close enough to it that you could touch it. Like it was in the sand, you could walk right up to it.
It was huge. It was bigger than the boat. And I literally have never seen anything like this in the 17 years I've been doing this. Happy feeling story, because as the water level comes up, it was able to get to deeper water. And then once we were heading back to home base, it started coming with us back out towards the bay.
I'm really glad that this story has a happy ending.
Cool to see.
I'm very glad it had a happy ending too. Now, it has a 19th century look to it. It's featured on a Nickelback album, and it's constantly surrounded by tourists. The Gastown steam clock is a staple for Vancouver visitors.
Paria Zabihi took to the streets to find out what exactly draws crowds to that steaming attraction. Have a look.
What made you come to the Gastown steam clock this afternoon?
Well, I've heard all about it, and I wanted to see for myself, so we decided we'd do a bike ride, and we decided to walk down here and take a look at it, and it is wonderful. It is so cool.
What if I told you that the steam clock is not actually fueled by steam?
It's a little unfortunate, but it's something worth looking at.
I'm sorry to have dampened your time.
I'm off. I'm leaving before it goes off now. I mean, what's the point?
We ought to bring it to the Philippines. No, just kidding, just kidding.
Just kidding.
No, we just love to see nice structures. It's an historic landmark.
How was that for you?
That was pretty cool. Yeah, that was good.
The Westminster chimes, beautiful.
Yeah, it struggled a little bit, I think, but it got it.
Would you recommend it to people?
I mean, it's a clock. I mean, sure. I mean, I think if you're in Gastown, it's a place to go and take a picture, and Gastown's really nice.
Ricardo, let me ask you a question. When do you think the steam clock was made?
I think in the century 18.
Let me tell you something. It was built in 1977.
Oh my God.
Illusions shattered.
It's a clock. That about sums it up. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. So please join her then. Good night.
Good night.